How's everyone feeling out there today?
Good.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Cold.
Good, thank you.
Whenever we get on.
Hello.
Hi, and welcome everyone.
Hi, I just had a question. My classmate that's in the same car as me, because we carpool, she's trying to log on, but she can't. And I think it's because we're both in the same car trying to log on into same service status.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she's listening, so I just wanted to make that
Okay,
clear.
so you're sharing the screen, and
Yeah.
sharing is caring.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize for leaving. Like I said, I am not Zoom savvy, so I will acknowledge that in a moment. But yeah, I literally just left the whole meeting, and I was like, "What happened?"
You came back pretty quick.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, I think we have 22 participants, which is really the majority that we had registered. We might have a few more filter in, but I think this is a great time if you want to jump in with anything.
Okay, perfect. Let me just get this everything turned off on here on my phone. Okay, and let me set my timer because timing is difficult for me, so I have to monitor this. 5 minutes. Let's do that. Just a second. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I want to thank you for being here, being present. My name is Maria Elena Greeman-Lynde, and I'm the outreach worker for Jewish Family Services under the Breaking Down Barriers program for the Mobile Crisis Response Team. That's a whole lot of information right there. So on that note, and before I get full on into the presentation, I want to really throw out a disclaimer right now. With COVID in hand and us coming out, things have changed. How we present, how we show up, we live via, screens. So for me, I want to let you all know that these are some things that I deal with, and also too that maybe some of all of you may have, be working through. So if we make it a safe space, acknowledge through vulnerability, then we're going to be able to carry this presentation out very strongly. So first disclaimer is that I do have Zoom performance anxiety. And with that comes the inability, even kind of fear that kicks in, because I'm not able to connect with all of you. I'm not able to connect through eyes because I don't see anybody here anymore, as well as that unable to sometimes process my thoughts, because my fire, my drive for this work is built, and my passion is built off all of you. You are the person that I'm carrying the message for. So the World Wide Web is now making that happen, and making that happen for us. So I'm letting you know I do have some anxiety, and it does trigger some other things in me. Also as well, you might be dealing with this. This is a whole new concept of, education. So if you feel the need to go off screen, please, I will not take it. I will not take it as anything wrong or about me. Sometimes we just need to disconnect in order to hear the message and not worry about like, oh, my earring or oh, my eyelash falling off. So completely get that part. Last but not least, also too, very well, in that space of the Zoom, I want to thank Abby. She will be carrying and doing the slides for me, as well as kind of like monitoring the time, because for me, just trying to concentrate on the message is really important. So thank you, Abby, for this. Last but not least, this is something new for me as I present, because normally I've presented all over the country, sharing my story. But what I've come to realize and what I struggle with is that I have a fluency disorder. Since a young age, I talk fast, my words get mushed together, and it sounds like, and I've been shamed for that. That does not mean my message is any less. So with that, I'm learning to work through this. So first of all, is acknowledging and letting you all know that's what I'm dealing with. If I need to, I will pause to allow my words and my heart to catch up with my breath. And on that note, you're probably wondering like, then how the heck is she gonna do a presentation? And all I gotta say is like, just stick around, you'll see. So if we're ready, we can get started with that. Okay, next slide. Okay, thank you. So before we get started into talking about addiction, we want to take the time to acknowledge the land. So Haka, we acknowledge San Diego County resides, and it's our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that this county resides largely on Kumeyaay territory, but we also want to recognize the other communities that are here, the Luciano, the Kupiano, and the Kauai. They have lived in this region for a millennia, and we're grateful for the opportunity to live and work in these homelands. I will give you and open up this space for anyone who wants to go on to the chat or would like to just speak freely and would like to offer their own acknowledgement to this space before we get started. And if there is none, completely understandable, and then we will just move forward. So thank you, and thank you, Land, for providing this space for us. Yes, thank you, Kathy. Okay. So, substance abuse disorders, drug misuse, drug abuse, and drug addiction. So why are we actually, the question is, talking about drug addiction in this space? And why is education, are we seeing this through a lens of trauma, resilience, and hope? We have just come out of a pandemic, and we're still currently coming out. I think it's so hard with the language to describe what we're experiencing right now. But what I'm seeing is that we are refacing a whole new world and bringing any trauma that we experienced during COVID into this space. During COVID, the rise of drug use went skyrocketing because we haven't known how to cope. We don't know how to deal with being locked in your home for 24 hours out of fear of possibly passing away. Our lives turned upside down instantaneously, and wiping our butts was more important than people actually not being able to breathe. And so that's why it's important that we talk about these issues in a whole new perspective. And I'm so blessed that I have experienced what I've had to experience in order to be in this space, because it's an uncomfortable conversation. We are all impacted, whether if your own self have dealt with the issues of drug misuse, drug use, or drug addiction, and it all falls under the substance use disorder. But right now we have as educators as well as students, we have a sense of, I guess you would say, for myself, I have a responsibility to share what I know. So let's go back to the actual language. Because if we don't acknowledge and put to words the language, it leaves it a big space open for anyone to throw in their judgments, their biases, and to create their own identity for you or anyone who may be dealing with this or living with this, excuse that. So language, I want to talk about the quick definitions of drug misuse, drug abuse, drug addiction, and how it falls under the scope of substance use disorder. So what is drug misuse? Drug misuse is generally associated with a prescription drug. So say I go to the doctors, I'm gonna use for example, my own life experience. During COVID, I had found a breast lump. I had to go into emergency surgery and had the lump removed. They gave me a prescription for oxycodone for pain. Prescription is 2 times a day, morning and night, as needed for pain. After 5 days, it stops. So drug misuse would be me taking those pills, missing a pill like that I didn't need. The next day, oh, it hurts. The same kind of normal hurt I heard the day before, but not needing, just only needing 1. But I still have 2 to take. So I'm gonna take 2 and I'm gonna feel better. That's misusing because that's not what the doctor prescribed for me. That's not how it was originated for me. Or say I have pills left over afterwards and I'm gonna go party and hang out. Oh, I got some oxycodones. Guess what? I'm gonna take some pills and go have a good time. That is drug misuse. What is drug abuse? Drug abuse is failure happens when someone chooses to take any kind of drug, whether it's alcohol, illicit drug, a psychoactive substance, and are misused to get high or inflict any kind of self-harm. That falls under the perimeter of what people would say is substance use disorder. So that's the first definition of that. And what that is it's an actual diagnosis in mental health spaces, or mental illness it's recognized. So the reason they have this and why people do abuse drugs is they experience significantly an altered thinking, behavior, and body function. So when we talk about COVID and not being able to live our normal healthy lives that we've had, people are trying to numb that. They're trying to cope. They're dealing with anxiety. So that would fall under that spectrum. So let's go into what is drug addiction. Drug addiction is a more severe, as you said. It is a brain disorder that manifests in an uncontrollable use of substance, despite the consequences. So an example of that would be, I have children. I've been using. CPS knocks on my door and tells me, if you continue to use, we're going to take your children. I get high because I have to use. It's the way that I cope with how I'm living. I'll hurt if I don't get high, and I choose to leave. And it's not a choice that has to do with my morals or my values. It has to do with an addiction, a real brain disorder that I live with. And this is true to my story. So what happens then is that my kids get taken, and I knew the consequences, but that had so much control over me that it falls me under drug addiction. So why it's important to talk about these things is that then we have an idea, a better understanding that when we share about experiences or write about them in our paperwork, anything that might connect to this, we're using the correct language. Because if not, what ends up happening is that we see stigmas happening, biases coming into play. And that's a very, very dangerous place. I know for me, stigmas destroyed me because I didn't know how to think outside for a very long time, that I was not what people thought about me. And I numbed for a very long time. And throughout the presentation, I will connect my story and how this kind of runs through. So now coming back into this work after COVID, we're seeing a big change in the mental health space. And I think something that just has really helped me and can get back onto track of where I'm at and where I need to be in my life today, and to be able to share my experience, is the idea of recovery language. Pre-COVID, there was a lot of the language that was used was very tough love. And for me, tough love was very harsh. I've already been beaten down by the experiences I had lived. I didn't need to be told that I was worth anything less than what I thought I was. And that's what sometimes we would find in the spaces of, talking about drug use disorder. So this is what recovery language is. It's respectful, non-judgmental, clear and understandable, and free of jargon and confusing data. Those two right there just goes to tell you that why it's important we distinguish the different labels that are being used, because then when there's open space, it gives, like I said, creates room for people to create their own thoughts or vocabulary through judgment or biases. Recovery language also carries a sense of commitment. It gives you a space to want to honor what you're staying clean for. It puts people first. It doesn't put your morals and values and you're less than. It emphasizes the ability, strength, and shows support. And I think as I created this presentation, support was such a valuable word to me because I knew that's what I needed. And it's taken me a very long time to learn to accept that kind of support. So, I think as we talk about this work or this space, that support's the back of our mind. That's the continuing thing that we want to know that we're supported. So just as life continues to change and we learn from mistakes and what does not work, especially now after COVID, that tough love space does not work. We need to learn to be gentle with one another. And so for me, when I talk about my experience, we can't talk about addiction. We can't talk about all of this without talking about recovery. And that's where the recovery language comes in. Recovery is the responsibility of the person that's been impacted. But it takes us a while to get there because we may not understand it. We may not be educated about it. We might be hearing all the wrong things that are not going to help us. So in that space, I want to share an experience with us and what has helped me in my recovery. And I've learned, and I created a blog called Homegirls de Corazon. It's a space where I do narrative therapy and I meet with young women And I help teach them, walk them through the core trauma and lead them through their experience, their hurts, their pains, their choices, and then to where they're going to go with that, and it helps to be empowered. And it's pretty much what saved me at times when I was so broken during COVID that I will forever be grateful to this space, and this is where my heart's at. So I'm going to share an experience with you, a story that I wrote before COVID. Go ahead and change the, go to the next slide. So I wrote this blog called Homegirls, Word Kills. And this is to connect of the power of what language does for someone who has been impacted or who has had experience and lived with drug addiction. This is May 31st, 2020. Growing up in a world where words were used as weapons, the ones that slowly killed me were the ones that came from the people who loved me until I learned to pull the trigger myself. As a little girl, my heart loved so purely, as all children do. But somewhere in mi vida, I began to see love differently in how I expressed it. It was a reflection on what those experiences were. I spent a lot of my younger years people pleasing. I remember always asking my parents, Mom, Dad, I was good, right? Looking for their approval. That would become a pattern in my life, and that would affect all of my relationships with other people, and it kept me in a place of very low self-esteem. It took me a long time to understand that where this came from, but best believe I spent many years living in this pain from the judgment until I hurt so bad that I began to hurt others. That's a lot for a little girl to carry, especially when her shoulders aren't that strong. Thinking back to moments beyond the sexual abuse I had experienced, I began to see love from a place of hurt, judgment, and criticism. This explains a lot of my need for approval as a child, and now as I opened that door of how ugly it felt living in that kind of judgment in this world, I opened up a door for forgiveness and healing. But how about for the ones who had loved me? Judgment, it only further alienates, and it only further shames and further traumatizes. Please excuse my language, but this is part of my story. You fucking slut. You're a piece of shit. Nobody's gonna want you. Maria, do you think you should wear that? You're never gonna change. What kind of mother are you? Maria, do you think you should eat that? Next time you sleep with someone, make sure you get their social security number so you know who the dad is. Fat bitch. You're only good for one thing. You're just a lazy welfare mom. What kind of wife and mother are you? You should be home taking care of your family, not going to school at night, not going to school at night. These are just very minimal of the words that have been thrown at me that slowly killed my spirit over the years, until I learned that words could slice a person open and could inflict a pain worse than any punch I had ever experienced. I then began to use them as my own weapon. That became my way to overpower anything or anyone that I thought would hurt me. But then my words were followed by behaviors that began to break the spirits of those that I loved. It became a learned behavior from the parenting I received growing up. And then I became that parent to my own children. It came from friendships with my homegirls that I entrusted with my secrets, only for those secrets to be used against me. And then women became my enemy. The homie told me he loved me, but then used words to break me and his fist to beat me. And the end result after all these years was a broken person who was going to hurt you before you hurt me. And that's how I learned to pull the trigger. Having any type of relationship or connection with someone became a game of Russian roulette, and I was determined not to get hurt. I would go to any lengths to win. I then became my own worst enemy. Waving the white flag of surrender. Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. In 2011, when I came to San Diego to start over and get clean off drugs, I finally had to feel all the pain I had caused myself and others without any way to numb. I felt like I was weak, that I didn't want anyone to think that I broke it down, that after doing so much for the hood or for my man, I didn't want you to know that the guys had kicked my ass. Where were all the homies that would have done anything for? Where was my vato who I thought would ride for me until the end? Most importantly, where were my babies, my 5 babies, and their unconditional love? It was then that I now know I had run out of bullets, and it was time to face this firing squad. It's taken me many years of struggling and digging deep down, and my journey's still not over, discovering where these wounds have come from. But what I've learned so far is that in order for me to begin healing, I must start with forgiving myself. This is where I found the freedom to grow and how I react to judgment today. Shots fired. Here are some examples of how I live life. When I receive a message on Facebook at 6 o'clock in the morning from some hyena who throws hate and hurt at me over some guy, I remind myself that this is her war, not mine. And I was once that hurt woman before my healing journey began. My solution was, I respond from a place of empathy, but with boundaries and behind this experience, Homegirls Dakota Soul was created. When I share an experience with someone who I trust and love, and they respond with, that's not something I would really be proud of. I must be reminded that I will not carry the shame of my past, and I will not allow anyone or any other person to shame me. Hurt people, and I realize my past might trigger pains from their own experience, but I will not carry their pain. My solution is today, I write a blog and I remind myself of how amazing I am and how hard I worked to be the woman that I am today, but I will not carry that pain. No one can carry that pain. I receive a letter in the mail and it's from my mom. And I know I need to be in a strong emotional and mental place before I open it, because her letters have broken my spirit. So I wait a couple months, I pray, and I take it with me on one of my spiritual weekends, and I take the letter, I go on the beach, and I connect with the universe, and I open it. I'm triggered by the words, and this is what specifically was told to me. Speaking of letters, I do still have all those letters I wrote to you in the past. And I think that at this time of my life, all I require is an acknowledgement from you of all that took place and a sincere apology. I cannot fathom your life story starting in San Diego. It started long before that, and that is the part that needs to be thrown on the table and acknowledged in order to move on, from my mother's words. My solution, I cry for the little girl inside of me, and I speak loving words to her. And I then write a letter to my mom, and I burn it on the beach, and I give it to the universe. And I forgive, and I accept, that me and my mom may never have a relationship, and understand with the most heartfelt empathy that she has experienced a lot of the things that she did not talk about. And I'm so glad that I have the freedom to share who I am today. So with that acceptance comes the ability to move forward with my life and focus on healing the wounds that I have caused as a mother. As I bring this blog to an end, it carries a lot of weight and my heart is a bit heavy, going back to some of those painful moments that I not only experienced, but inflicted onto others that I love with all my heart. Am I perfect? Nah, never that. I still have a lot of growing to do, but I know for darn sure I'm not that person I was back then. And I'm constantly looking for solutions. Solution. I sit here and I read through all these loving cards that I have that I've received from the people over the years since being here in San Diego, who've been willing to get to know me, the real me, the authentic me, the healing me. And I'm reminded of the chingona that I am. And oh, I have learned that it's okay to put my weapons away. So for me to acknowledge that is to look at the things that have hurt me in the past. And not everyone's going to be ready for your change or your experience, but your story is your story. So as we move forward into the next space and why we talk about language is so important, we want to go into what language can lead into, and that's stigmas. Next. So stigmas, they run both ways. We all carry biases, we all carry beliefs. It really represents of how we have been raised, the communities we've been around, our families, and then the things we begin to believe in throughout the world are internalized stigmas. I've had a lot of internalized stigmas of myself. So when we talk about drug abuse, we talk about drug addiction, SUDS, we have to realize it comes with some heavy negative language and beliefs that have led people into the criminal justice system. It runs government, it empowers governments, and it breaks and destroys people's spirits. So imagine wanting to get clean. And I'm going to share something. I have a son. He's 22 years old. And today his car broke down this morning. And I was going to go visit my husband. And where things have changed, was like at first I was like, oh, I'm so mad, because like I get to be a mom today. So I live here in Tijuana. So I drove towards Rosarito to get my son and his girlfriend. And he was uplifted and happy just to see me. It's taken a long time to be able to even say that. And him and his girlfriend were like, we're 4 days clean, we're 4 days clean. Recovery language, support. 4 days ago, my son called me crying. And my son's like 6 foot tall, 6 some tall, fully tattooed, thinks he's mas chingon and he's all that. And to an extent he is, he's my son. But sometimes it can go in the wrong direction. And he was crying because he just wanted to stay clean. He didn't want to hear that his girlfriend was struggling with her own addiction, that she was just, and I could be empathetic to both. And I gotta just sit there and love my son. We're gonna work this day by day. Just go to sleep and rub his head like the mom he needed when he was a little boy, that has led him to that moment, because he hasn't dealt with this stuff. But just to hear that being there, to be that support. I didn't hear the word be an addict being thrown at him. I didn't hear the word you don't fiend. I wasn't the welfare mom, I was just mom. And that's a blessing, especially when it comes to stigmas. Like I said before, stigmas broke me. I believed what you thought about me. When I began to heal, I began to realize it doesn't matter what you think about me, it's what I think about myself. And that's created me to be the ability to be, yes, I do deal with addiction. I live with an addiction that I have to take care of every day. I've had to create a toolbox of all the things and supplies that are going to take care of me. And stigmas are real, but like I said, they go both ways. So when I created this, I come from an era of the just say no to drugs. Thank you, former First Lady Nancy Reagan. And my head was really like, got triggered. And I was like, I'm gonna throw this on there. They get it wrong. And this is your brain on drugs. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? Had me terrified as a youth. And so when I fell into that scope, I was now the person I was scared of growing up. But then I thought, and I actually ran into the paperwork that the speech she spoke to the public, and I believe it was Congress, about the war on drugs and just say no to drugs. And she put in there this emphasis on having to educate the parents and the teachers so that our students don't have to be impacted. Here we are being educated. The narrative just changed, and the people who are being impacted are now carrying the stories. And that's why we find support, empathy, compassion, understanding, and the true stories behind addiction. So I will not judge, because everybody has a perspective, but I know what today works for us and what's going to help heal this world, especially coming out of COVID. So on that note, stigmas, we're going to our next slide. So this comes into the space of the work that I do now. Never did I imagine, when I was a child, never did I say, I want to work in the mental health space. To me, there was a stigma behind it. You know, I only connected stigma to any kind of opportunity that the court tried to give me behind diversions, drug diversion, because we had to go to the mental health building for the county. But if you could understand the power, or I hate that word power, the empowerment I have been able to have for myself, being able to talk about mental health. That is where I can recognize that I am not a bad person. Stigmas will tell you that you have bad morals or no morals. You have no values, that you're just this bad person that was created by however you want to believe, but you were created. But realistically, substance use disorder is a brain dysfunction. As you could say, there's certain wiring. That's part of it, but there's also the trauma that coincides with it. Can you imagine experiencing some of the things I shared about in my story and being able to cope with it? We don't go to school. They don't teach us coping mechanisms to deal with life. We don't learn how to have relationships with human beings. We don't know how to be parents when we have kids. So this is a cycle. So with trauma and substance use disorder, I used drugs for a very long time in order to numb, because I did not know how to deal with those pains that I carried. I didn't know how to say I was being hurt by a man every day coming off the bus. Rather, I was shamed for it. So that was, for me, that was my story with connection to my substance use disorder. But I've also experienced severe PTSD out of my choices, well, things that I've experienced, say that correctly. You know, being raped as a young girl, my innocence was taken away from me. I began to turn to men to validate me, just love me, and I will be intimate with you. At a young age, you're considered stigmatized. You're a hoe, you're a slut, you're this, you're easy. I believed it, but I needed to be loved. You know, my dad was an alcoholic, the most loving man in the world, but dealt with alcoholism. He couldn't be fully there for me, but he tried his darn hardest. And I believe that him trying his darn hardest was a lot more than what I wasn't able to receive by someone who felt my security or being a parent was giving me monetary stuff. Trauma for me was that after being sexually abused at 7 years old, isolating it and not dealing with it, I began to eat. That was my coping mechanism. And as I began to gain weight, my adopted mother, who is my mom, began to be like, well, maybe we'll take you on a shopping spree on Rodeo Drive if you lose so much weight. Or 9 years old, going to Weight Watchers. That kind of is a neglect, a huge space of neglect that children are experiencing nowadays, because we're so focused on how someone looks, not realizing that the person is based within their heart, and how you show them as parents your values and beliefs and how to be better people. But I can't blame it, because we're in a cycle, generational cycle with that. And so I began to believe these thoughts about myself, that I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't good enough. I'm gonna do some speed and stay skinny and all sucked up, thinking I looked great, but I was like looking like a skeleton, making hurtful choices that were hurting other people. And out of that came my 5 beautiful babies, 5 fathers, and it's a part of my story that I will own. And the people that got hurt the most were those children. So substance use disorder, PTSD, coincided. They call it co-occurring. They work one-on-one. And it could either or that you come into this world with, they play off each other. So if we don't acknowledge that you're not a bad person, or you have no morals, there is a need to take care of these things. And so trauma has to be talked about. That's the only space we're going to be able to begin acknowledging these spaces and getting help for substance use disorders and mental health illnesses. And your recovery all depends on what works best for you. And I think that's the difference. Recovery for me was, I grew up in recovery because of my dad. And then I was forced into recovery when I had my children taken away from me. But what ended up happening is that it wasn't fit for me. And so I had to learn what works for me. And I've seen so many different ways that people do recovery, and it's beautiful, because we're not a one fit figure community. I will never fit into a size 5. So they made plus size. We learned to create things that are going to help people fit their needs. And that's what I love about the co-occurring, because it acknowledges all around wraparounds, and it creates a space for wraparound services. So on that note, we're going to move to the next slide. So what is my job? So how I started up and why I'm here today is that I do outreach work, and I was hired by Children's Family Services in March. In March, I began. And what I do is I go and I outreach to the community to talk about the mobile crisis response team. When I do this, I'm hearing a lot now that everybody knows about it, which is great. So I'm depending on you as a community to go out there to share about it, because this has changed anything of how we see mental health or the fears that come with it. I know when I was in need, I didn't know how to ask for help because I didn't want the police showing up, the siren lights. But the county has created this space, and it's throughout San Diego County. And we have Exodus are the people that come out in northern San Diego, and the rest of San Diego is taken care of through telecare. And what it is it's a 3-person team. It's a certified clinician, a social worker, and a peer support specialist. There is no police involvement. There's certain criteria that do fall under that, but it gives you an option to call other than calling 911 or PERT. Because some people have certain, beliefs about that, and it's understandable, especially during these times. But what I love about this and why I'm so heartfelt to share about it is because it shows us, first of all, that we're seeing there's a need. Mental health and the stigmas, we need to leave alone. We need to actually give the resources for people. And this is an all-in-one service that they come out to you. They have an access line of, and I love this. It's 1-888-724, so 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And then repeat that again with a 0 days. There's 0 days closed. They're always available. And this access line will evaluate whatever you're walking through, or say you have a family member or community, someone, your neighbor, who you're just worried about. They'll come out. They'll connect with them. They'll provide the resources, see what their needs are in order to make sure that their mental health needs are met, or substance use disorder needs are met as well. For me, this would have made a huge difference in my life. Back in my 20s, I had gone out drinking with some friends in a jacuzzi behind my house. I came back after being raped by 3 because I'd been drugged. I got home, they walked into my door. And I'm screaming, like, I want my dad. I'm crying, like, in shock, not knowing what happened because I was coming out of this daze. And my mom called 911. At that time, that's what there was. What I remember is just crying, and I need my dad. The police show up. My mom's accusing me that I'm using drugs and I'm this bad person. And it wasn't the best experience. But if I had the MCRT show up, been there for me and what I was dealing with, I want to experience a lot of the things I've experienced. But then again, I wouldn't be able to be here to share with you about the mobile crisis response team. So please, as a community member, as an outreach worker, please get this message out. If there is a need, 888-724-7240. I need it. So there's someone out there who needs it too. So thank you. Good. A little bit for the presentation. So I want to go backward. So for me, going back and looking and being very open and very vulnerable with my story and my experience, I want to talk about the resilience that it takes a person to be able to even address this stuff. Because she's doing a lot better than I would have been doing. Thank you, Abby.
Sorry, it's jumping around.
Okay, gives me a opportunity to get a drink.
This one? Oh,
yeah.
It doesn't like that one. It wants to keep jumping ahead.
Okay, there we go. Perfect. Resilience. We can't talk about someone who is experiencing and living with drug abuse, drug use disorder. And I have to put myself in this place too. I do fall under this new language. I'm still learning it, just like many of us are learning about pronouns, many are learning about different cultures. It's a learning experience. And what I'm going to ask is to be patient, because if we force it, it will not be absorbed. So COVID-19 took me out. I was on top of the world. I had, graduated with my associates at San Diego City College. Everyone knew me, national leader in the formerly incarcerated work that I did. I was working for the ACLU. I was going around and teaching, management, administration, how to work with people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system. I was living the best life. Pre-COVID, I got into a relationship. There was an issue I still hadn't worked on. That was some of my self-love. And I had not, every relationship I've been in has been violent, extremely violent, as well as I've been the person to force violence on someone else. Through my healing journey, I've come to connect what that's from though. So I got into the relationship, moved to Tijuana, and found myself being choked. The difference between then was the person back then would have hurt you back. I now know where that hurt comes from. So when someone hurt me, I couldn't hurt you back. I didn't want to be that person. And it's not that I didn't know how to defend myself as I could. My heart just didn't have it. So that happened, and I was getting out of a space where I was coming out of, trying to work myself out of that. Then the month before COVID really kicked off, my job with the ACLU, the contract ended, and the need for me was no longer there. I'm also dealing with learning there's trauma impact, being trauma that's caused by working in the nonprofit world. It's still a system. I also experienced that through the educational system, through working with deans and administration, and it broke my heart because my heart is very centered in this work. My heart is centered in all of you. So then the week that COVID shut down, I got a call from my mom. My dad passed away. My dad has been my strength. He was the man that made my story of being adopted who I am beautiful. He's the one that would tell me, yep, I got the call. I told you, Mom, let's go. We're going to go pick you up. They have a baby for us. He had me named Maria Elena Greeman before he had even met me. And he told me the minute he met me, laid his eyes on me, it was love at first sight. My dad's my first love. We couldn't even have services for him because they shut everything down. Talk about wipeout. So mind you, I had years clean. I was living the life. I had gone from surviving to living, and then all of a sudden, woof. But I'm resilient. So those first few months, I took the bulls by the horns. We're gonna be strong, get through my dad. I didn't grieve. Work was trying to get out of this violent relationship, was finally able to, and I was doing so good. And then it hit me. I was watching TV too much. I was watching the news. I was seeing what's going on in the streets. I was worried my son because he was out there, at different events that were going on to uplift our communities, to make sure that they were safe. And I took Toradol for the first time. So I said, take Toradol. It's going to help you with your anxiety. Because I was having severe panic attacks by just being stuck watching everything that was going on worldwide. And that took me out. About 3 weeks later, I left the boyfriend, gave me the strength to leave him, but I was back to using methamphetamines. And I had this shame over myself because how could I have been this and now I'm that? And for a long time, people would put me on a pedestal, like, Maria Elena, like, you're this, you're that. And I have to learn, I've had to learn that I don't want to be on nobody's pedestal. I do not want to live up to anyone's abilities but my own, because I will let you down. And I don't need to carry the shame of that. I will carry myself. I own my resilience. COVID was tough. So I've created this presentation called Survival of the Fittest. And it's a overall experience of someone who's lived surviving, only knowing it, got to learn to live, and was forced back into survival mode. And I've come to realize that is the most dangerous place for me to be in. Because you know why? I'm not scared anymore of anyone. And that's a true proven fact. Because I'm more scared of myself because of what I'm willing to do to myself in order to survive. That's what COVID brought into my world. But I want to go back a little bit there, and I want to share with you a blog that maybe gives you the significance of the impact of drug abuse, not only within myself, but as a mother and my 5 children. So this was called Mommy's Little Girl. March 18th, 2011. I remember that moment like it was taking my last breath. I sat in the passenger seat of my ex-husband Monstero's truck, and I was filled with so much fear. And I can say I literally felt my heart breaking into a million pieces. Monstero had all my belongings in the back of his truck, 2 boxes and a suitcase of anything I had left. I just left the dope house. And he gave me the opportunity to say goodbye to my youngest daughter, Serena, my Serenita. She was 4 years old. How do you say goodbye? If I close my eyes, I can still see her walking out to me from the house with her abuela. And it's like she knew. But then again, this was not the first time I was going to break her little heart. Because for only being 4 years old, me, how that's all she's ever known. I tried my hardest to be strong, but looking into those big brown eyes, it's like she wanted to carry my pain as I told her goodbye. I can only imagine the pain she felt as her mom, the woman who had brought her into this world, walked away and was not even sure if I was going to make it back. My addiction to the gallas, to the drugs, and to the hymn outweighed the love I wanted so much to give to my baby. How do you explain that to a 4-year-old little girl? How do children love so unconditionally? I remember squeezing her so close to my heart, and I reminded her how much I loved her, and that I'd be back soon, and once I got better. I'm still not sure that was a promise that I was going to be able to keep at that time, but I knew that's what her little heart needed to hear. Then my ex-suegra gave me $20 and told me, go take care of myself, which meant go eat, because when I'm on drugs, I don't eat. And we drove away. I never looked back because I now know if I did, I wouldn't be the woman that I am today. The woman who walked away from her daughter that early afternoon was so broken, mentally, physically, and emotionally, and was filled with so much shame, and she had to lose everything, including her babies, to find her way home. My Serenita, she had to learn so much at such a young age, and I always had to find excuses to all her little girl questions. Mommy, why do you have blood all over you? It's because me and your dad, we went to get a hamburger and French fries, and we were crossing the street, and we had ketchup on it, and a car hit me. So I got ketchup all over me, Mita. I'm okay, just ketchup. Truth was, I had just flown off the hood of her dad's car, but that's a story for another time. Mommy, why are you crying? I had a long day. I'm just tired. After I'd been up for a whole month and I just couldn't get high anymore. Mommy, why don't you and Daddy come to pick me up? You promised. Mija, the truck, it broke down. We couldn't get to you. I'm so sorry. Me and her dad were out running missions trying to come up so we can get high. Where are you, Daddy? Please come pick me up. Why don't you answer me? I love you. I remember one early morning in my little studio apartment, laying with Mosto in bed after weeks of being up. And his phone kept ringing and ringing. It was my suegra calling. We finally found the courage to go back and listen to the voicemails. And it's what broke us. Our addiction to drugs, the lifestyle, and to each other had our little girl's voice playing over and over again on the phone as we curled up in each other's arms in tears, trying to find comfort from the pain that we were causing our baby. To hear my little girl's voice begging to please come get her will forever haunt me. But today, that little voice gives me the strength to be a better person. My dearest Serenita, my beautiful, stubborn, and loving little girl, words cannot explain how much I love you and how much love I have for you. But I'm sure my actions throughout the years may have you questioning that. As a little girl, all I wanted was my mother to hold me close when I was hurting, to be told how proud she was of me. A mother I could connect with, but that was just not a part of my childhood. And I see that's what I longed for so much, and I wasn't able to give it to you. My drug addiction and my lifestyles in the streets was what I held on to because it's all I've ever known. But today's different. Because of you, I strive to be a better woman, an example to you. A mother who wants only the best for you and to see you succeed. I want you to be able to unlearn the behaviors I've taught you so that you, when you're mama, you'll be able to say, I broke that cycle. You make me so proud, Mita, because whenever you struggle, you find the amazing strength to fight back. You speak your mind, and when things do not feel right and you find the courage to stand up for others when they are or have been being judged and mistreated. My baby angel, me, little mini me. Continue to be the resilient young woman woman that you are, and never stop loving so deeply. I love you, my princess. Unconditional love, what my babies have taught me. When I write about my children in my blogs, you have to understand how hard it is for me, because I'm still mending these broken bridges that I've caused myself behind my own choices. Before that, guilt would keep me loaded, but today it helps me jump in my car and drive back home in a heartbeat when my children need me. I listen to their tears when they feel alone and they feel like they're not being heard. And to walk with them through their trauma, even with knowing that the next day they just might push me away. Learning to write from my heart has me sitting here in tears pouring down my face, but knowing this is what is needed in order to continue healing and for all of us to grow. I will take these steps for myself, my children, and for my future, because I want to forever stand rooted in love. My daughter is now about to graduate from high school this year. Don't get to see her as often as I like, but she is an amazing young woman. Takes the bull by the horns, and I know that's because when I began to change, she began to be the reflection of who I was. And I know that I'm breaking generational cycles. Addiction, living with substance use disorder, PTSD, mental health, illness, and just living through COVID is crazy. I'm gonna end on this before going to Q&A. My husband now, coming out of COVID, I'm now having to stand strong. I have this job that I love that's coming to an end, but it was the beginning of me getting back into what I love, and I'm so passionate about it. I'm so grateful for Jewish Family Services for believing in me and creating this opportunity for me. It's allowed me to transition into what I love to do, and I'm now creating my own business so that I can do this on a regular basis. I want to be vulnerable. I want to be empathetic, and I want to be compassionate because there's someone that needs to hear this. Last but not least, out of the turmoil, when I met my husband, he was on the run. Things happen for a reason, and I just have to trust in the universe and stay grounded in who I am. My husband is now facing 54 life, and I'm now given the opportunity to face a criminal justice system full force, fully within my own self-worth, knowing that what changes criminal justice systems: empathy, love, understanding, talking about drug abuse, drug use, trauma. These are the things that are going to change this. I have the opportunity to create the things that the system has broken us from having. I'm creating resources and building connections. My husband has a fighting chance with this case because I refuse to let him serve a life sentence, because I know his traumas, I know his hurts, and I want to make sure that the world hears it, on top of creating a space that it's not just for him, it's for everyone. My kids are in my life. My son has 4 days clean. I get to share this with you, and life is great. Don't count someone else because of what you might see, because when you look at me in public, I'm fully tied down. Wasn't like this before, but I wanted to be in my authentic self. This is who I am. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of the people that have uplifted me and believed in me, professors, administration. I've had the whole world support me, but it wasn't until I learned to love myself and was authentic. And part of that is stigma behind how I look. Well, guess what? These came after I learned to own my voice. And with that, my voice is still the same. The message is still the same, a lot stronger and more educated because of my experiences through COVID. But this is who I am. And I want to change the faces of who's leading these different areas of, we talk about that have been impacted. So support, compassion, and empathy, and just taking the time to be on part of these Zooms and being willing to be educated about these things is just the tip of the iceberg. But you guys don't even know how much that you've allowed people's hearts to be able to be heard. So on that note, thank you all for being here, being present and with me. And for that, I'll open it for Q&A.
Thank you so much. Yes, please feel free to unmute, jump in, or drop it in the chat.
Yes, please. And let me say, I should have said this earlier, there are no dumb questions. There is no questions that I will be offended by, because I've learned that those are usually the spaces that we need to have these uncomfortable questions. I'm like the person that comes into spaces and bring the elephant into the room. I will be like, bring it on in, but I do it from the biggest space of love and understanding, because if we don't have these conversations, who is? And so I'll be the courageous one. So anything, it's all open questions.
We have some comments in the chat. Wow, what a journey. Thank you for sharing and spreading this important message. Thank you for sharing your story, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah. Do you have any advice for someone who might be considering making a change but is unsure?
You know what? I talk to people all the time, and I think you sometimes hear people hear that, you know, you have to hit rock bottom. Then I hear people say like, no, you don't. And I think when we're more conscious as a community and understanding to this, that will create a space for people to be open to talk about this, because then they're not scared. The stigmas are the things that keep people loaded and keep people not asking for help. And how we carry ourselves in these presence of these conversations. Because even though like words are painful, the looks, the eye rolls, the body language is readable too. So I think when a person's ready and when it's meant to be, it happens, because it's painful. I don't know why people will think like, you're just a bad person and you want to be like this. Believe me, I did not want to be or experience the things that I experienced. I didn't deserve it, a lot of things. I just didn't know how to cope with being, you know, raped as a child, raped as an adult, multiple, you know, sexual partners, because I was just looking for love, abandoning my kids, losing them to CPS, getting them back and getting high again. I mean, it's constant. So you can't expect a person who's experienced trauma, no coping skills, know how to change. So it's whatever, I guess you would say, when a person's ready, or they learn that this space is safe to talk about it, it'll happen. But I had to lose a lot. And like I said, I lost even after COVID, during COVID, and that was painful. And I would never, ever want to inflict that kind of pain on anybody else. But I will tell you, it has made me a very strong and resilient woman. So in that space, I mean, there's really no answer to that. There really isn't.
Well, thank you. And not to cut off anyone else who might have a question, but I am going to advance. You shared your contact information.
Yes.
We also, Dustin, one of our MiraCosta students, was really sad to have to not be able to join us today, but he is sick, and hopefully we're wishing him to be feeling better much sooner. But he said we, in the meantime, could share his contact information.
Yes.
If you have any questions or thoughts for a fellow MiraCosta student, Dustin has been one of our peer educators and is happy to field questions as well.
And something I've learned in this, I want to thank you, Abby, for creating a space for us, that just meeting Dustin via Zoom and you know, the emails, I could hear like just how proud he is. Because people don't believe that we're capable of doing the things that me and him are living every single day. And you might not realize it, but there's many of us living like this. You know, my pathway into this role was through education. When I came to San Diego, I didn't have anything else. I knew I had to manipulate the system because I couldn't get a job because of my background. So I go through school. I can get a Pell Grant. I can work my way. I'm good at working my way through things. And so that's what I did. So I started at City College as a student. Great. Found my identity through sociology. And then through the Chicano background perspective. But I found my voice, and that was such an empowering person that's been told to shut up the whole time, or your voice doesn't matter, or you're unworthy to say anything. And so as students and like meeting Dustin, it's like meeting like my peers. And so that's what makes it so special. They now have created this certification called a peer support specialist that the MCRT has. I've been certified since then, and also as well, Dustin is a peer support specialist, and he is also he has gained his alcohol and drugs, what's it called? I don't have it written down, but he has his degree or his major. I don't know the exact name.
I think he's a psychology major with plan to transfer, and he's currently working full time as a peer specialist in a recovery program.
Yeah, so I mean, that's powerful to be able to say that like we've been here, but we've gotten here and we're still going. Just shows like resilience, and our experience have taught us that like we can face anything. And I'm very blessed that education has been the core of that, because I dropped out of school when I was like in 10th grade because I had so much anxiety about being around people. Like my parents put me in a psychiatric hospital for 2 months because I wouldn't go to school. And so that's just through another thing. I mean, like, you don't go to school, you're being forced it, then we're not dealing with the issues. And so it was the trauma that really impacted me at that point.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for
Mhm.
being here with us and sharing your
you.
story and all your hope for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you all for being here today and making this next last hour very valuable for me. I appreciate you all so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you
I
so
got
much.
through my Zoom anxiety today. Woohoo! It's a win.
You did great.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you.
really valuable. Really appreciate your vulnerability and your wisdom. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Well, I have to jump off. I'm a mentor for the NAMI group, so I have to go jump
Awesome.
onto that. So I will talk to you all later. Feel free to contact me. I'm available. I'm an open-ended book and I have a lot to give. So please feel free to reach out to me. You all have a good night.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you so
Good night.
much.
Thank you, Abby.
Is the recording gonna be available?
Great question. I'm hoping so. I am navigating all the windows, but that's my intention, is to have it on our blog. So health services, if you get to the health services website, has the Wellness Wave blog.
Okay.
And that's my hope, is that we'll be able to post it up there.